in this video we'll be going in detail about how we can do styling with CSS. Also, we'll be discussing in detail about the syntax of CSS. So let's start with this one. As you can see, we have these two lines, and that's the code behind this. That's the CSS code, and that's the HTML code. And this HTML code has been styled by this CSS code. In the CSS code, we called, before curly braces, we call this as the CSS selector. So whatever element you will put in here, the CSS will be applied to that specific element. So for example, if we change this element to H1, and when we save our document, now as you can see, our styling has been removed. What's the reason for this? Because this CSS code applied to that specific selector, which is the element, the paragraph element. Now if we do it for H1, this means that H1 has been applied to this CSS. Now if we save the document, now you see that H1 has been applied, the CSS code which we added here, but the paragraph element below that has been reverted to the default state because it's under the P element and the CSS is only applied to H1. To apply the same CSS on both of these elements, we can add a comma and add our additional element here. Now when we save the document now, you can see that our CSS has been applied to both of the elements. So to understand the CSS, that part is the selector part, where we will select our elements based on HTML element, classes, and ID. And these are the properties. And before semicolon, we have the value for that property. Now let's start discussing some more about CSS selectors. In this case, we are applying the CSS code through HTML elements. Now what we're gonna do, we will apply the same CSS using the class format. So let's call it my first class, and copy the same code for now, paste it here. Now I'm gonna take another element which we can span class. I'm gonna mention my class here, add some sample text, and close my text. Now to make it a little different, we gonna make the color green. Now to whatever element I'll apply this class, it will have these properties. In this code, I'm applying this class to the span here, and this text should have the same color as mentioned here, and the text align property and the font size should be 40 pixels because I added this class in here. So that's the second selector which we have, which we call class. Now let's save the document and see the preview. Here we go. As you can see, it's clean color and font size is, as mentioned here, 40 pixel. The text align center is not working here because in span the text align property is depreciated, so we'll have to add a div to make it text align center. But that's we will discuss further more down the line. That we don't need to mess in with. So we were just discussing our selector. Now what we're gonna do, we will create another paragraph. And add some more sample text. And we will apply our third selector, which we call ID. And now let's copy the properties from here. I'm gonna name my ID as my first ID. Let's take the color yellow and apply this ID here. My first ID. And now it will have some issue because we are applying two properties on this P element, because we have mentioned here that whenever you see the P element, apply this CSS property. And now we are defining the my first ID as these properties, and we have applied our my first ID to this element. What we're gonna do, we will just remove this P from now on, from here for now. And let's save the document to see if our ID is working for the styling. Now when we go back to document, hit refresh, as you can see the styling for this span is coming from the class. So let's take a look at this view. So that's our H1, and here's the styling for H1. And now for this paragraph, we do not have any styling mentioned for P element, so that's why it's showing on the default. For this, add some more sample text. Let's go here. So here's the add some more sample text. The styling for this is coming from this ID, my first ID. Here's the styling is coming from. And for the last one, the span, we are calling our styling from the class selector, and that's our class selector, my first class. Okay, now we have discussed our element selector, class selector, and ID selector. Now there's another selector, which is this steric, and this is used for selecting all of the elements. So for example, if you want to apply any property which you want to apply to all of the elements on your document, you can do that. So for example, if I apply the font weight 900 to all of the text available in my documents, I can just do that and save the document here. And now when we refresh here, you can see all of the text has been bolded to the font weight 900. And let's try reducing it to see if it's working fine. 300. 300, save the document and hit refresh. As you can see, all of the text has been reverted back to the font weight 300. So that's the selector where we can select. By using this, we can select all of the elements in the document. So there are three ways we can add styling. We can add CSS code into our document. One method is by using style tag, which we are doing at the moment. Another method is that we can separate all of the CSS code in another file. So for example, if I create a new file here and I just copy all of my CSS code and remove that from our document, paste it here and save it as CSS file style.css on my desktop, and now call the CSS file to the document here by using this line of code. So this is the file path. It can be on any of the folder. You can just add in the complete URL of that CSS file, and that's the reference of how you can call the style sheet. Now if I save the document, I already saved the file here. Now if I save the document here and refresh document here, you can see there are no changes because all of the CSS is being saved here and coming from this file. Now let's try changing the CSS in this file. Now if I increase the font size through style.css file in here, let's increase the size to 60 pixels and save the file. And now when I refresh the document, you can see the size has been increased. So that's the second method of how we can apply the CSS to our document. Now another way to add CSS is the way we can do it inline. So how we can do that? So for example, this is H1, and now what I'm gonna do, I'll just add in the background color here to black. So that's the same CSS code which we used. The same. The only difference is that we added it inline, so it will only be applied on H1 here. Now if we save the document, refresh the preview, as you can see the background color has been applied. So these are the three ways we can add in CSS to our document. One method is to add style tag under the header. The second is to add the style, to call the file of style.css. And the third way is to add the inline CSS by using style attribute. About CSS comments. First of all, let's find out the reason why we comment our code. So for example, if I want to test my first class, that how it's gonna look like without font size property, and I will not just remove it and save the file, because I might have to remove multiple lines, and then adding those back will be a little hectic. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna comment this line so it will be ineffective. So this line of code will not be applicable. This is just a comment which is visible to us but not readable by CSS. So I'm gonna save the file and see if it's affected or not. So I just saved the file, and when I hit the save, as you can see that the font size property is not applicable to this class because I commented the code. We can do same thing with multiple lines. So just add in here, and now all these three lines will not be applicable. Save the file, hit refresh, and as you can see, color green, text align center, font size, all these three properties which we defined are not applicable, are not readable by CSS because we commented the code. And now we can simply remove these hash and static to get our code back to work. Here we go. Save the file, and we will be back to the story. Here we go. While we proceed further with the tutorial, you have seen the video like about 14 to 15 minutes, and I hope you are liking the content. That's why you have seen that much. I would like to request that please subscribe my video, like the video, and comment on the video below so I can create more videos for you. Cool. Let's proceed with the tutorial. Now let's learn more about the colors in CSS which we use, like this property, green, yellow. Other than defining the color itself, we can also add an RGB value, HEX value, and HSL value. Let me tell you what is RGB. RGB stands for red, green, and blue. These are the three color combination which we can add in the value of and create new colors. We can simply find out any RGB value from Google. So if we like a particular color and we want to apply that same color, we can just find an RGB color code. And here you can see there's a website, HTML color codes. As you can see, it's showing up RGB color value here. So I'm gonna choose any color here. So for example, it's a darker orange, and here's the value for that color. So I'm just gonna, other than red, I'm gonna define my RGB value here, which is RGB. Open the brackets, close the brackets, and add in the color code here. Copying from here, pasting it here. Means that orange color which we copied the RGB value for will be applied to our H1. Now let's save the document and see if it's working. I'm gonna hit refresh. Here you go. As you can see, after refreshing, we can see that our orange color has been applied. We copied the color code from here, the RGB value from here, and we added our color property value into RGB format to apply the color. We can also add transparency in our RGB color. So for example, if we just add an RGBA, and then on the last we define the opacity or alpha of that color. So if I do it 0.3, it will reduce to 70% transparency and it will be visible to 30% from that specific color. Now let's refresh the page and see if it's working. Save the document before refresh, obviously, and I'm gonna refresh the document. And as you can see, it's really hard to see because the visibility is just the 30%. I'm gonna do it with white color so we can see how it works. So that's the RGB color code for white. Just copying the color code, pasting it here. Save the document. Now let's go back and see if it shows up. There you go. The white color is just visible at 30%. Now we will try increasing that. Make it 80%, 0.8. Save the document, save the document, and refresh. There you go. That's the 80% opacity of white color. Now to make it 100%, just add in 1. Save the document, hit refresh. So that's how RGB and RGBA works. Other than RGB and RGBA, we have hex color codes. Let's show you guys how it works. So that's the hex color code. As you can see here, that's the hex color code for white, and we can choose any color from here. Now just select in green and copy the hex code from here, copy and paste it here. We don't need to define RGBA in that case. We will just add the code as it is, just like that. That's the hex code for the color. Now when I save the document, we should be able to see our H1 in green color, which is the hex code. Here we copied from this side, and when I save it, there you go. Our hex color code has been applied. So that's the second method of finding the color code, which is hex format. The third color format which we have is HSL, which is this. H is for hue, S for saturation, and L is for lightness. Just like RGB, we had red, green, blue color combination. in HSL we have hue, saturation, and lightness. So let's find out HSL codes. Do we have it here, or no? I think we have to find it. HSL color codes. I'm just gonna Google HSL color codes, and here we see the codes. So here we can see all of our HSL color codes. So let's try applying this one. Let's copy this here and paste it here. I'm going to remove this because if we add it, our CSS code will not work. Just going to remove it. Save the file. And it should be this light pink color. Our H1 should be just light pink color from this HSL code. So just hit refresh. And here we go. Our HSL code is working fine. We have learned how the color codes are working. Now we will start playing with background image. Let's start by adding a background image to this text here. Add some more sample text, this one here. So that's the ID which we are using for this paragraph text. Now what we're gonna do, we will add background image to the background of this text. And for that, we will use background image property, and to set the value, we will add the URL of the image which we need on the background. So I already have saved the image for the background. You will need to add the complete URL in here. So that, for example, that's the URL of the document here. You will simply go to the image which you need to use, copy the URL here and paste it here, so it can be used as a background. For now, just because I have the style.css and the gem.jpg file on the same folder, we don't need to mention the whole root of the file. I'm just gonna hit save to this file and see if it's taking the background. I just saved the document, now I hit refresh, and as you can see, our background image has a URL. Background is taking the image on the background. Now let's try playing with some fun. So for example, if I want to add a background gradient behind this text, I already have the gradient image saved in my desktop. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna rename the file name here. That's the file name which I have already saved. I'm gonna save the document and see how it looks. There we go. And we also have the background repeat property. Here's the property where we can mention it if we want to repeat the image which we are using as a background image, or we want to like repeat it horizontally or repeat it vertically. So let's do this, repeat X, and change the background gradient to the one which I have, the smaller one. So if I repeat it horizontally, it will be applied to all the background repeated horizontally. So let's save the document, hit refresh, and as you can see, the gradient is repeating horizontally. We can mention it here to not to repeat, no repeat, and it will be showed only once. There you go. You might have some situation where you might need a repetitive image in some cases, or you might have some cases where the image is repeated and you don't want to be repeated. So you can play with that property to define that whether you want to be repeated or not. You can also define background position. So for example, if you want it like on the right side of the background and top, you can mention it here and save the document, hit refresh. Here you can see it change its position because we have defined the position here. We can make it center as well, so it will be completely centered and not showing on the right or left side of the background. Here we go, and save. Refresh. There you go, it's showing up on the center. It's a different way to play with a document and to style a document differently with the help of CSS. There's another great property here which we call background attachment. And here we have two properties, two values. One is scroll and the other one is fixed. And to show you how it works, I'm gonna add a little more content to a document, so we can add a scroller, and that way I can show you how this property works. So let's add in some more content. Let's add in a div with a lot of dummy content. So I'm just gonna add a lot of dummy content and BR, so that way we can have scroll on a document once it's lengthy enough. So I'm just gonna copy paste, and let's save the document if we have the scroller now. Save the document, still don't have the scroller. Let's add in some more content. Now let's save the document and see if we have the scroller. Okay, now as you can see we have the scroller. Now let's add in the background attachment property to fix, so you can see how it works. So here we go, we have it fixed here. Save the file. File is saved, and now when I refresh, here you can see it scrolled down itself with the way we scroll, because it's fixed on its position where it was. Our text is moving, that's why it removes itself when we scroll down. And the normal behavior is the scroll behavior. Save. Save. It will scroll as along with the scroller here. So that's a really cool property which you might have seen on the website. You scroll down and the background is scrolling in a really cool way. You might be thinking what it is, so that's what it's all about. Background attachment fixed. Okay, enough playing with the background property. Now we'll start playing with some borders. Let's try adding some borders to these elements. Let's first remove this dummy content because I really hate it. So just removing it now. Removing that div here. Done. Save the document. Oops. Okay, we have removed the dummy content. Now let's add in some border to this one, because this one is pretty unstyled. So let's add some style to this one. So that's the paragraph, and we're gonna give it a class for our border test. So that's our class name, border test. Now let's add in CSS to our class name called border test. Now let's add in border style. We have a couple of multiple border styles. So let's start in with dotted and save the file. CSS file, save the HTML file because we added this class, save the HTML file, and now when you refresh the document you can see the dotted borders. Woohoo, we added our first border. Let's try some more different styles with these. Okay, when we have multiple elements in a document and we cannot remember all the classes for each of the specific element, what we're gonna do, we can simply inspect element on any of the element. Here's the option for that. So when you click on inspect element, you will see the HTML code, and there you can see which class or which ID this element has. So for example, if you select this small pointer, let me zoom in for you guys so you can see better. Here we see in zoomed in mode. So we're gonna click this small pointer here, and when we take this to any of the element on a document, it shows us that which ID or class is applied to which element. So if I inspect element on this one, as you can see, it changes the color and tells it that's the element and that's the class which is applied to it. So what are we gonna do? We will apply the border to this element. So let's just inspect element. Now as we know that we need to add border to this ID, we will just start adding the border here. And now this time, let's change the style so we can see what type of borders we have in CSS. Border style, and we're gonna try dashed this time to see how it looks. Now after applying it, save the document obviously, and hit refresh here. So I'm gonna close the developer tools here and hit refresh to see how it looks. So that's how the dashed border looks like. That's the dotted one, and that's the dash one. Now add in different style of border for this one. Again, I'm checking the class or ID which we have applied in this object element, and we have my first class here. Now here's the one, my first class. Now I'm gonna add the border property, border style, add solid as the property value, save the document and refresh here, and that's the straight line. Now let's try in some more possibilities which we have. For example, double. That's how the double looks like with the double line. And groove. That's how the groove looks like. The ridge. That's how the ridge looks like. It has a little 3D effect if you look closer. A little bit of 3D effect here. We can also round our border by defining border radius. So let's try doing that. 5 pixel, maybe a little bit more. And there we go. As you can see, we have a little curve on the borders. That's due to the border radius property which we added here. Cool. I think we have enough learning for the borders in CSS. Now we will start playing with the CSS margin property and see how it works. Margin property basically works for adding and positioning your CSS element to where you want it to be positioned. So for example, let's try adding some margin to this element. And that's the ID applied to this one. So let's add in some top margin to see how it works. And I'm gonna add 100 pixel margin. And as you can see, it added an extra space on the top. So it's basically for the adjustment. And we can add margin bottom to add in some space on the bottom of the element. And here we go. As you can see, we have top margin of 100 pixel and bottom margin of 100 pixel. Now let's see what happens if we add the left to right margin to this element. Now we added 20 pixel margin left and 20 pixel margin right to this element. And as you can see, it added an extra space, and reduce the width of the element because we added the margin to the left and the right. And now let's see how the padding works. So we have a similar element, similar CSS property called margin, called padding. Sorry about that. So we just rename it to padding to see what's the difference between padding and the margin. Let's add in top and bottom for now. And here you go. As you can see that padding is working within the element, so it's expanding the element from top and bottom by 100 pixels. We can also define padding in one single line rather than mentioning the top and bottom property. We can just remove this whole thing and add in property values like this. So in this case, when we add the padding property value like this, when we define 4 values, it will be like so that's the top padding, that's the right padding, that's the bottom padding, and that's the left padding. So let me write that for you here in case you need to note it down. So we can either define the padding in one line like this, or we can also do like padding top, padding bottom, padding right, padding left, so either we do it this way or we can do it this way. So there are 2 ways to apply padding, and these are the 2 methods. One thing I would like to add in here, that if you're watching these tutorial videos, I would like you to practice this on your computer, because you learn by doing or by actually practicing the code rather than watching the video and doing nothing. So if you just watch the 3 hours or like the longer video and you just watch it and do not practice it, it's not gonna give you any benefit, or it's not gonna make you a developer. So better is to watch the parts of the videos and practice it on your computer so you can become a professional developer. Okay, coming back to the code. So let's remove all this for now. So I'm just gonna comment it out for now. And see how that works. And now let's try changing the right value, and let's increase it a little bit more. Show you guys how it works. As you can see now, it has more space here. So let's add in some more. As you can see, it's going to the left because we are adding more padding to the right. 200 pixel. As you can see, it's further getting pushed to the right, getting pushed to the left because we are adding the right pixel. We are increasing this space to the right here. Let's see if the top left and bottom thing works. So let's move it back to 20, add in top as 100 pixel. Okay, top works fine. Now let's try and the bottom works fine. Now the finally left one, and here we go. As you can see, it added the space here. We can use the same method for margin. So that's again top margin, right margin, bottom margin, and then left margin. And there you go. Let's add an equal margins. There you go. So if to understand margin, difference between margin, padding, and border a bit more graphically, you can just inspect element. And then if you scroll down, here you can see the box model that we call the CSS box model. So that's our text, that's the padding, that's the border, and that's our margin. We can reposition on a browser and then apply the CSS to position our element. So if I just change the value here to 200, you can see it's adjusted on our browser. We can apply this CSS margin top 100 pixel to our this ID, and it will be in a same spot when we save the document and see it on the browser. So it's developer tool is really good for the testing purposes. We can adjust our element and see how it looks and what CSS we can apply. And let's see how when we adjust the top border to 10, as you can see, the border has increased the size from the top only, and we can do the similar on our left, on right, and bottom. So that's the CSS box model. Okay, now let's start with some text alignment properties, text decoration, and some properties related to text decoration and stuff. So let's start with this one. So what I'm gonna do, just first inspect element to see if I'm in the right class. My first ID, okay, that's the one we will be working. Now first is the text align property. Text align. Okay, we already have it on the top, so let's play with that one. So we have possible possible values of left and right. So let's see how all these looks. Saved. Okay, due to the padding, it's not moving to the left, so we're gonna remove the padding and margins which we added here. So just removing it from here. Remove this commented code which I showed you guys, and save, refresh. And as you can see, because of the text align left property, it's been aligned to left. We can align to right, and we can align to center. So that's the possible values for the text align property. Now let's start playing with text decoration. We can overline it. It's adding the line to the top. So let's remove the borders because it's hard to see for you guys. So I'm gonna remove the border style as well from here, and when we preview it, as you can see, it's adding the line on the top of the text, which is called overline, and we have line through, so that's crossing the text, that's line through, and then we can finally underline, which is the mostly used one. There we go, we added the line under the text. We have text transform property. Uppercase, making all the characters to uppercase through CSS without needing to retype the text manually. We can just add in the class and style our text through CSS. The possible values are uppercase, capital K, capitalize, where we will have just first letter of the word as capital, capitalize, and then lowercase to make it all lowercase. Cool. We have another property for text decoration as letter spacing. So we can add space in between the letters. Let's add in 10 pixel. Save, refresh, and it's working fine, adding the space in between the elements. Now let's try reducing it, just getting it closer together by adding the value in minus. And here we go, we added the value in minus and it's really close to each other. Now let's try another property as line height. So all of these properties are the ones which are being used mostly on the CSS code, and there are like many other properties. If you add in, like, as you can see, our Notepad++ also showing us other CSS properties, which I might not be able to show you guys because the video will be too long, and I'm trying to make it as short and as important, trying to show the important properties like which we use normally in our code. So let's go on with the line height and add in 200 pixel line height, as we already have some space in between to see how the line height works. And saving, refresh, and there you go. You can see it added the line height 100 pixel, 200 pixel by line height property. Similar to the letter spacing, we also have word spacing. Let's try that. So it will just add the space in between the words, not between the letters. So let's refresh. Try and adding some more. There you go, it's working fine. We can also add the minus value, just like we did in the letter spacing. And we have text shadow, which is my favorite one. So which we can add a shadow to our text. So let's try adding that. Saving the document. There we go. We can see the text effect, text shadow effect on our text, and we can change the distance by changing the values here. Here you see it's adding some space. It's making it move to the right hand side. Similarly, we can change the values here to change the location. As you can see, we can style it by changing the values here. And we can also add some blur effect on our shadow by adding the third value here. Save. And as you see now, it's a proper shadow effect looking up. We can increase the blur effect by increasing the value here. You can see it's increasing the blur effect there. Let's try decreasing that. Cool, looks good. You can play it and practice it. Make sure that you pause the video and practice all of the CSS code which I taught you guys till yet on your own computer, because if you don't do that, you're wasting your time. You are like wasting all of the tutorials which I teach you. So it's better pause the video and learn that, practice that on your own, then come back to the video and see and proceed further with the tutorial. Okay, now let's try changing the font family here. So font family, let's make it, so I'm gonna change it to the Cedar console, and that's how we change the font family. Saving. As you can see, our font styling has been changed. We can also apply custom Google fonts. So let's first search the Google font which you like. Here's the website where we can find the Google font. So let's try in some different font. Okay, I like this one, so let's click on that. Let's select this one, and here's the option to embed it. So here's the file name and the reference which we will call in our HTML file. So just copy the code here, add it on our HTML header section just like we added the CSS file. Just paste the value here, and then as you can see it's showing that how we can call this font family. So let's copy the value, property value here, and paste it here. Good. I'm saving both the documents, HTML and the CSS file. Now I'm going to hit refresh and see if we have successfully applied the font here. And here you can see that our font is similar to what we had here. Now let's try one another font to make sure that it's working fine, because if some of you people are unable to see the difference on the font, it's quite similar. I mean, it's same as the Google, but let's try applying some different font so we can see the major difference. Okay, let's search in joining writing, which will be a prominent difference if we apply that to our font. Here we found it, the dancing script. Now let's call this one. Same procedure, select the style, and where's the pop-up? Here's the file to embed. Just copy the file here. Here's your header, embed it here, and then that's font family value. Just copy the value, paste it on your CSS file here, skimming the file. Okay, let's refresh it one more time. Okay, there we go. So the font file took a little extra time to load, but as you can see, our font has been applied successfully and it's working well. There's another method to add font families into our website locally. That's by downloading the file and adding that file in our document. So I'm going to apply that for this text here. Let's try this one. Okay, so I'm going to download the file. We have an option here. Let's do the dancing script one. Download family. Okay, here's a zip file downloaded. So I'm gonna unzip the file. Okay, so I have added this file here by name of dancing.ttf, which I downloaded from the Google. That's my CSS file which we are working on. Okay, so let's go to your style.css, add in font face property here, add font face, and I'm gonna name the font family here. So in this case I'll just write dancing and mention the URL that where the font file is present, which is on the desktop. by the name of dancing.ttf. So that's our font file, and here we go. Now wherever I will call the font family dancing, it will apply this font to that specific element. So let's try that on hello world. I'm gonna inspect element to see which class or ID we are using here. So it's H1. I think we don't have any class here, so let's move into this one. So it's border test class. Let's find the border test. So yep. So here's the one where we can apply the font family as dancing, and I'll save the document to see if it's working. And here we go, our font has been changed. Let's increase the size to make it more visible. 24 pixel, and there we go. Looks good, right? Okay, we learned how to add fonts. Now we're gonna learn how to add icons. As we have seen on multiple websites like Facebook, Twitter, they have thumb icons for like and heart icon for like, stuff like that. So we're gonna try adding that. So there are icon libraries available online which we can use. One of it is called Font Awesome, and that's pretty oftenly used font icon library which we'll be using, Font Awesome. So here's the one. So we'll download the file from fontawesome.com, and then we'll apply it as the file in our header, just like we did in the case of font. Okay, so let's start downloading it and see how it's working. Start with that. Start. Okay, I need it for desktop with downloadable files. So I'm gonna download the files. Download Font Awesome free for the web. It's being downloaded. Okay, once it's downloaded, we will extract it on the same folder as we have the CSS file and our HTML file, and then we will call the all.css file in our header to apply the icons, just like they're showing that on here. So I'm gonna extract the zip folder. Okay. So here's the zip folder which I downloaded. I'm extracting from this folder. Okay, now let's rename the folder as Font Awesome for making it easier to reference the file in header. And let's see if we have all.css file in the folder. Okay, there's another folder inside. We don't need any subfolders. Just renaming this one Font Awesome. Delete this one. Renaming this one as Font Awesome. Okay, let's see if we have all.css file. Okay, here we have all.css file, and we will just copy our URL structure here, and then we will add it on our head here as per the instructions mentioned here. So let's copy this code, add it here, copy this URL to identify the folder, Here we go. I'm gonna fix the splashes. So we already have the HTML and CSS file on a desktop, so we don't need to add in the full URL. So we can just add in font awesome and then CSS folder. Cool. We have added the URL and reference the file in our header. Save the document. Okay, now when we have the CSS file all in our header, now let's try adding some icons. So here's the CSS, here's the HTML code through which we can add our icons. So just copy this code and try pasting it here. And save the document, hit refresh. Okay, here we have our icon showing up, as you can see. So that's this. Let's add in the BR and try adding a big icon so you guys can see how it looks. So let's find the icons. Let's go to the icon library. Icons. Here's the list of icons which Font Awesome provide, which we can easily add on our file. Okay, let's try adding any of the icon which we might need. Let's try adding this emblems. Okay, so here's the code for emblems icon, and I'm just gonna paste it below the icon which we used before. Here's the code, save the file and refresh. Here we go. Here we can see font icons. That way we can add font icons. They also have different sizes. As you can see, they have different sizes, so we'll be just adding 3x on the code, same code, and we'll have a bigger icon. So let's try adding a bigger icon. Okay, so to increase the font awesome icon size, we will just need to add FA and the size of a font awesome icon. Like for example, 3x I'm adding here. That will increase the size. Save file and hit refresh. As you can see, the size has been increased. We have the available sizes here. That's the 7x, that's the 5x, 3x, and that's how it's gonna work. Okay, we learned how to add the font icons. So once again I'll try my best to explain whatever I can, but without practice you won't be able to polish your development skills, polish your coding skills. So I recommend you guys, please pause the video and practice the code which I have teach you guys here. And I'll try to create the second version of the CSS tutorial video for you guys if I get the good response here, obviously. So please do not forget to comment the video, like the video, subscribe to my channel so I can create more and more quality content for you guys. Have a great day.